Dr. O, it's fun to be with you to talk about things that, frankly, in a lot of cases that, my understanding of it is just, it's almost childlike, versus, the way that you look at it. I mean, you spend, here's the thing. I don't know that a lot of people have any idea what an economist does for a living, right? You spend an awful lot of time, reading. You spend an awful lot of time, doing calculus basically to determine.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I spend a lot of time reading. That's for sure. I spend a lot of time in data.
Yeah.
Trying to keep track of what I consider important macroeconomic indicators.
Yes.
And that's kind of old.
My point here is this.
Yeah.
It's challenging when you have the information.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And in this period of time where, we're not getting as much information from the federal government, it's exacerbated. It's even more challenging. Guy Berger, who's somebody that you've followed for a while, he's a workplace economist, or I will call him by his correct title, as a workforce economist.
He's a labor markets expert. He's an economist. He's used to be at LinkedIn for a while. Now I think he's a senior fellow at the Burning Glass Institute.
Yeah.
Again, it's just an all around good guy. Like you would call him an all around good guy. And
so you shared with me a piece that he offered up. And I believe that this published, over the past weekend. And it starts this way. While most government collected labor market data, the best we have is currently suspended due to the government shutdown. We're fortunate that the U.S. Department of Labor is still collecting state level data on unemployment insurance claims. And he writes, that data looks okay with pockets of weakness 18 days into the shutdown, which was the point at which he wrote this. We're now, 25 or 26 days into the shutdown. He writes, still it's early and the problems caused by the shutdown will compound the longer it goes. But he sees three things. The initial claims and continuing claims are in aggregate little different from their pre-shutdown trends, and that includes federal workers. 2, pockets of weakness. We've seen a surge in initial claims by federal workers to the highest level since 2019, and continuing claims by federal workers to the highest level since 2021. While these may reflect the shutdown or federal government RIFs, that's reductions in force, right? While reflecting acute distress for these workers, their magnitude is small. And then 3, another pocket of weakness goes in geographies with a lot of federal workers. We've seen pickups in jobless claims for non-federal workers. So he's seeing that there might be like what he's calling a spillover effect. So you shared this with me. And I had a chance to spend some time with it. And I look at the chart. The chart that comes along with this, it looks a little bit more alarming than the way that he has articulated what he's saying. But that's
you bucket of weakness 1.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So let's talk about this. So, having state level data, I think is pretty valuable. Is there an issue with state level data? In so much as that it is not as accurate. Is there any reason why, as a government, the Department of Labor, right? Inside of our government systems, there's a lot of things laying on top of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right?
There's nothing wrong with state data. In fact, I am going to be speaking at another conference, in a few weeks.
Okay.
On data and the fact that basically, it's important to take a look at all of the data before making, any kind of judgment call, right? It's important to look at different sources of data, have access to all of the data, and even look at the time series as opposed to just look at 1 month or 2 months or the past 3 months, right? And I think that's going to be the main message, is that right now we're in the dark. But we have the state level data, and the state level data is telling us, confirms kind of, that basically, federal workers are being, most affected, which is exactly what we expected. Now, I think pocket of weakness too is the part that is somewhat concerning for me. Is that you remember these workers, these people in the economy are out there buying stuff when they have a paycheck. And so what happens when they don't have a paycheck anymore and they pull back on their spending? Well, the plumber down the road and the grocery store down the road and the restaurant down the road is no longer collecting that additional revenue. And so if they had plans to expand, they're not expanding. If they had plans to, if that was just enough to keep the lights on, they're going to have to cut back on their workers. Right. And so that is the part that is important to remember in this whole saga, is that there could be spillover effects that hurt local businesses in areas where you have a large share of those government workers.
Right. So, so I guess, specific to the United States, you'd be largely talking about the DMV, right? DC, Southern Maryland, and, I guess it would be sort of like, South or Northeastern Virginia or Nova as they like to call it. Right. But is this something that, once the shutdown is resolved, is fully resolved? I mean, what's the, is this a blip, or is this something that's, that could be more significant than a blip?
You would hope it's a blip. Historically contractors have not gotten paid. Right. And so those contractors are going to feel it. They might even scale back a little bit on their spending. And, I say this all the time, we're creatures of habit, right? So like we tend to stick to a routine. So, economists will say people smooth consumption over time, right? This consumption smoothing, right? I save a little bit now so that when there's a rainy day, I can continue to buy the same stuff that I was buying in the past. That's a consumption smoothing. And so, potentially what happens is, you get a drop in consumption and ultimately, you never get that back. Right. And that's one way to think about it. Potentially you get kind of this revenge spending, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we really don't know.
And by that, you mean I didn't have the money. I'm kind of pent up. I need to make the hedonic treadmill turn here. I'm going to go buy something that I wanted but couldn't at the time.
Yeah, or needed, and now I had to have it and just got to go and get it, right? And so you get a big surge. The income gets replaced, and you get a big surge in spending, and maybe that's temporary. Maybe it's just you see a Q1 2026 big increase in consumption, right? So we don't really know which way this is going to play out, but essentially, I think pocket of weakness too. He said it's small for now. Is what I'm mostly worried about. I'm really, and by the way,
is the spillover effect. That's what you
I feel for those government workers, but I really am. I'm also very concerned about the spillover effects. And remember, it could affect many different industries. All right. And so that's when all these industries are affected at the same time, that's really when you start to worry about, kind of a little bit about the direction of the economy. I have been I've always been very optimistic, I think, on this show. And lately my optimism has turned down a notch. Because I see all these things. I see this government shutdown being prolonged. I know that the labor market was weak going into it. And I see inflation persistent. Close to 3% right now. All of that, points to a slowdown. And I see 2026 potentially as a year where, look, we haven't had a recession in a very long time. And when a bunch of things.
No, you teased this last week in your column on your Everyday Economics column. Yeah. We didn't talk about it. But
when a bunch of things start to sour, it's very easy for the smallest little shock to send you into a downturn. And you're so concerned about these things that you're seeing that are not looking great, that you don't see this other thing coming. And so we have to be very careful when things are weak, the consumer's weak, the economy, only half of the jobs are adding, half of the industries are adding people. That, right, the smallest little shock today could actually turn the economy on its head. And that's, I think that's what worries me a little bit, going into 2026. By the way, we also have an election year, right?
No, it's a midterm. It's huge. And you would have thought, the economy was such a huge issue in the 2024 presidential, elections. Ultimately, the Center Square's Voters Voice poll identified that very, very early on. And it was something that we wrote about. I wouldn't say ad nauseum, but we wrote about it quite a bit. And looks, I think in the United States, it's always about the economy, right? When we get to an election that has this kind of magnitude. And so I would imagine we would see that, again in 2026. And there's a lot of space between now and, literally a year from now. I think that certainly will have an effect on the primaries. Let's bring it to a close. It's a good conversation as always. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you listen to Dr. O and me each week on the Center Square Radio Hour.